When you think back to World War II, what's the scariest weapon you think of? The atomic bomb, right? Wrong. In today's episode of History Goes Wrong, we're going to talk about bats. You might be thinking, bats? What does that have to do with World War II and scary weapons? I want you to imagine a bat strapped with napalm, ready to explode at any second. Sounds great, right? No, anybody with a brain right now is going, maybe not. But to the US military, they thought it was awesome. Deep in the archives is a project that sounds so ridiculous, it sounds like a cartoon. It's called Project X-Ray. You might be thinking, how did this come about? How did the US decide, like, hey, bats, that's a great idea? Well, you see, it was actually a US dental surgeon that recommended the whole idea. Yeah, that's right, dentist. The same guy that would put your braces on was like, yes, bats, I've solved the issue. The dentist was actually heavily inspired by the kamikaze planes in the Japanese attacks on Pearl Harbor. Which is kinda crazy, because how do you get from, no, I see it. When I was younger, we used to throw up dog food to bats and watch them just swoop down and eat it. So I can kinda get the, kamikaze planes, bats. Yeah, maybe he was cooking with this one. You see, following Pearl Harbor, the US wanted to strike back at Japan's industrial capacity. But unlike German factories, Japanese manufacturing is heavily decentralized, taking place in highly flammable paper and wood buildings spread across dense cities. The US realized, hey, large explosive bombs are inefficient. They need thousands of tiny targeted explosions to burn the city to the ground. You couldn't just do one really big bomb and fix that problem, right? Here's a problem. We had conventional incendiary bombs that dropped from planes, but they were super inaccurate. We couldn't tell where they were going. So obviously if we dropped a bunch of bats in there, they would be more accurate, right? Y'all have had a conversation with bats, you know that they're really good with directions. I've seen the Batmobile, that thing basically drives itself. So since all these warehouses were really dark, they were like, hey, the bats will just, wander into the dark places and it'll be good. They'll just know exactly where to go. Nothing could go wrong. Let's go back to this dentist, right? His name was Dr. Lytle S. Adams and he was from Pennsylvania. He realized that a special breed of bats, specifically Mexican free-tailed bats, really like the dark. So after realizing this, he did what any sane person would do. He went to Washington, D.C. and pitched it to the White House. But here's the crazy thing, right? So you would expect the military to hear this and go, I don't know about this. That's exactly what they did. It sounded like absolute lunacy to the military brass. This kept Adams up at night, because he really wanted this bat thing to work out. He knew he was going to save the world with bats. It was then, in Washington, D.C., a bat signal appeared above the sky. Who was going to save the day? None other than the dentist. You see, he wasn't just gonna let no come for an answer, right? This man wasn't just any ordinary dentist. He had connections. He was gonna use everything in his power to get this through. He used his personal connection with the president FDR to make this actually happen. FDR famously noted, hey, this man is not a nut, okay? So he's not crazy, right? According to the president. So we're gonna roll with it. I know this guy. You know this guy. He's a great guy. Yeah, let's roll with the bat thing. Getting approval was the easy part. Building the bomb that would require the inventor of napalm and a whole lot of ice, that was the hard part. Okay, so here's the science behind it. They have the bats, but a bat can only carry a single ounce of napalms and explosives combined. This really changes the scale of how many bats you need. Well, they were ready to find out. Here's another problem. Imagine you had just joined the army, right? First day on the job, they look at you and go, all right, today you're on bat duty. You think, what does that mean? What could bat duty possibly? No way, dude. They pull up with a truckload of Mexican bats, feisty, full of life, and they expect you to strap explosives to them. Okay, so I'll be honest with you. There's a little something I left out of that scenario. Here's what really happened. They stuck the bats in freezers. I'm not even kidding. PETA, if you're watching this, you can ignore that part. Again, they stuck the bats in freezers. This made it to where the bats were docile enough for you to strap the napalm to them before they started going crazy again. Everybody's seen the Mythbuster episode where they did this to bees and tied strings to them. They did the same thing with the bats. This also solved their problem of transportation. You can't just stick 1,000 awake, squirming, armed bats inside of a bomber plane. So the military stuck them into ice cube style trays. Okay, sorry. He stuck them into ice cube style trays into massive bomb shaped casting. I want you to picture that for a second because I'm struggling reading that. That is hilarious. I like to picture bats with goggles, pilot goggles, all shoved inside of like a torpedo shaped rocket flying through the sky, aimed at Japan. So now that they've got them into a bomb shaped casting, they have to drop it from the plane, open midair, and giving the bats exactly enough time to thaw out and wake up before they hit the ground. Yeah, that's right. They kept them frozen, dropped them out of the plane, and were like, yeah, they'll wake up, I think. On a side note, you know that feeling you get when you're falling in your sleep? Imagine that on steroids. These bats were laying in their nice bomb-shaped bed, and they all had that feeling. And they woke up and they were like, oh wait, no, I'm really falling this time. Alright, with this whole plan being said, what could go wrong, right? Is it the strapping of the explosives? Is it the freezing the bats and getting them cold and docile? Or is it the fact that you can't just tell a bat where to go? You can't drop it in the middle of nowhere and expect it to go right to the target and explode. In 1943, the team arrived in Carlsbad Army Airfield to test the live weapon. During the setup, someone accidentally let a handful of the bats get a little too warm and they woke up early. The bats, now being feisty and awake again, fly away from the light and go find dark, exactly what they were trained to do. Just not what they were expecting at that moment. So when you're doing a test on an airfield, the only dark places nearby is going to be structure. The closest structure at the airfield was the barracks, the control tower, and also the general's car. So let's ponder on that. What do you think happened with these bombed, explosive-wearing bats that were scattered across a military base? They were obviously able to find them all, right? Wrong. The bats started detonating and burned the whole base to the ground. Imagine trying to explain this in a meeting, right? So, the base gets burned down, and you're in a meeting in Washington, D.C., and they're like, alright, how did the test go today, boys? We see, yeah, so the base, right? You know that base that we spent a lot of money on? Yeah, the really nice base. It's still really nice in a way, in a much crumblier, burnt up way, which, if you think about it, it was kind of a success, right? So the bats did what they were supposed to do. They found dark and they exploded. That's cool. Also not cool, you just burned a military base to the ground in the meantime. So the base is destroyed, but ironically, the catastrophic failure was kind of a success. Therefore, the Marines Corps, who takes over the project, names it Project X-Ray and perfects the design. They didn't give up the project. No, this was a success. Just a costly success. By 1944, they were ready for mass production, baby. The only problem is the time it would take to make enough of the explosive bats and have them war ready was almost a year. So that would drag into like mid-1945, which on the timeline of World War II means that it is the peak of military spending. So the budget is bleeding. Someone had to step in. Fleet Admiral Ernest King stepped in and crushed what would have been the most hilarious attack in US history. He ended up diverting all the funds to focus on a different top secret project. Lame. What could have possibly been more cool than a bunch of bats flying around and causing chaos in Japan? Oh yeah, that's right, the Manhattan Project. Okay, so, yeah, I can see efficiency, atomic bomb in one hand, bats in the other hand. To me, the bats are still cooler. The atomic bomb drops, making Japan pull from the war. And the bat bomb is relegated to a bizarre footnote in history. If you like more bizarre history, you should like, comment, and subscribe. And also, check out the video that might be flashing in the top right hand corner of your screen right now. I put a lot of hard work in these videos, and I really appreciate those that have made it this far along. And if you have made it this far along, the funniest comment about bats in the description is going to get pinned. That's your prize for making it to the end of my video. Thanks. See you in the next one.